day my husband brought another woman into our home, I didn't cry. I just stood there holding a mug of cold coffee, wondering when my life had stopped belonging to me. That's how it began. Not with a fight, not with shouting, but with silence. The kind of silence that hums in your ears, heavy and endless. My name is Clara, and for 15 years, I believed I was living a simple, quiet kind of happiness. My husband, David, and I built our lives together one piece at a time. A modest house, 2 children, countless memories sealed inside its walls. We weren't perfect, but we were steady. At least, I thought we were. Our mornings used to start with the smell of coffee and the sound of the old radio humming in the kitchen. David would read the news out loud, and I'd pretend to care about things like stock prices or local elections. I cared about the sound of his voice more than the words. He'd smile at me, a small, familiar smile, and say, "You always tune me out, don't you?" And I'd laugh, because back then, love was easy, predictable. When our children grew up and left for college, the house felt quieter but still full of life. I threw myself into small routines, tending to my garden, repainting the hallway, cooking dinners that could feed 4, even though there were only 2 of us left. But over time, something shifted. David started coming home later. His tone became shorter, his eyes distant. He'd sit at the table, scrolling through his phone, pretending to listen while I talked about the neighbors or the tomatoes I'd planted. The warmth we'd built over the years, it started to feel like a fire dying out, ember by ember. I told myself it was normal, that maybe he was stressed from work or just tired. But it was more than that. I noticed the way he avoided my touch when I brushed past him in the kitchen, the way he began dressing sharper, cologne stronger, as if he had somewhere else to be. One evening, while folding laundry, I found a faint trace of perfume on his shirt. Not mine. Something floral, young, expensive. I stared at that shirt for a long time before tucking it neatly back into the drawer. I didn't confront him. Not then. Instead, I convinced myself it was harmless, that I was imagining things, that after so many years together, maybe we just changed. But deep down, I knew something was coming. A few weeks later, the air in our home felt different, charged, expectant. I could sense it even before he said the words. That morning, David seemed restless. He kept pacing from room to room, avoiding my eyes. Finally, he sat me down at the kitchen table, the same table where we'd celebrated birthdays and anniversaries, and cleared his throat. "Clara," he said, voice careful, measured, "there's something we need to talk about." My stomach tightened. "What is it?" He looked at me as though he were searching for the right script to recite. "I've been thinking a lot lately about us, about where we are." I waited, holding my breath. He continued, "I think we need some space, time apart. But," he raised his hand when I opened my mouth, "I don't want to move out. This house, it's still my home. I just want things to be less tense." I blinked at him, confused. "Space? What does that even mean, David? You live here." He nodded. "I know, and I want to keep it that way, but I've been seeing someone. Her name is Ruby. She's going through a rough time, and she needs a place to stay, just temporarily." The words hit like ice water. I laughed, not out of humor, but disbelief. "You're joking, right?" He didn't flinch. His eyes were steady, almost cold. "I'm not. I want to be honest with you, Clara. She means a lot to me, and I think having her here might help me figure things out." Help him figure things out. That's what he said. I stared at the man I'd built a life with, the man I'd trusted with everything, and realized I didn't recognize him anymore. "David," I whispered, "you're talking about bringing your girlfriend into our house, the house we built, while I'm still living here." He exhaled slowly, as if I was the unreasonable one. "I thought you'd understand. You've always been compassionate."
Compassionate.
That's what he called it. For a moment, I thought about screaming, throwing the mug in my hand, calling our children, but instead I just sat there, still, silent, empty. Because sometimes heartbreak doesn't come with noise. It comes with stillness. That night, I couldn't sleep. The clock on the wall ticked louder than it ever had before. Every sound in the house, the creak of the floor, the rustle of curtains, felt like a reminder that nothing would ever be the same. When dawn finally came, the sun spilled weakly through the blinds, painting everything in pale gold. I made coffee, though I couldn't drink it. My hands trembled as I placed 2 mugs on the counter, a habit too strong to break. And then I heard it, the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. Through the window, I saw her, Ruby. She stepped out of a sleek red car, her hair shining in the morning light. She was young, younger than I expected, early 30s maybe. She wore a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. David walked outside to meet her, his posture lighter than I'd seen in years. He took her suitcase, opened the door, and let her inside like she belonged there. And I just stood there. I watched as she walked through the living room, glancing at family photos on the wall, photos of David and me with our children, vacations, holidays. She hesitated at one picture, a faint awkwardness crossing her face. Then she smiled at me politely, like a guest, trying not to intrude. "Hi," she said softly. "I must be Clara. I've heard so much about you." I nodded, unable to find my voice. David placed a hand on her back. "She'll be staying in the guest room," he said matter-of-factly, as if he were talking about the weather. In that moment, something in me went completely still. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I just stood there, holding my cold coffee, feeling the walls of my home close in around me. The woman he loved was under my roof, and I was suddenly a stranger in my own life. The first few days after Ruby moved in felt like living inside someone else's dream, one I couldn't wake up from. Everything looked the same furniture, the same framed photos, but the air had changed. The rhythm of the house, the way it breathed, was different now. I kept telling myself I could handle it, that maybe if I stayed quiet long enough, it would pass. But nothing about the situation was normal. Ruby was polite, almost excessively so. She called me Ms. Clara at first, as though I were an older aunt rather than the woman whose husband she was living with. She'd offer to cook, to clean, to help out around the house, as if that would somehow make the humiliation easier to swallow. David acted like we were one big, blended family. He'd sit at the dinner table, chatting with Ruby about her new job or some movie they'd watched together, while I sat across from them, pretending to eat. My fork would scrape against the plate just to fill the silence between their laughter. Sometimes I'd excuse myself to the kitchen, under the pretense of needing water, just to catch my breath. I'd stand by the sink, staring out the window, trying to remember the last time my house felt like home. It's strange the things you start noticing when you're trying not to break. The scent of Ruby's perfume lingering in the hallway, the extra toothbrush beside David's in the bathroom, the way she began rearranging small things, the throw pillows, the spice rack, the family photos on the console. One afternoon, I came home from the grocery store to find the living room completely changed. The curtains were different, lighter, silkier, and my favorite armchair, the one I used to sit in while reading, had been moved to the corner. Ruby stood on a stool, hanging a new painting where our family portrait used to be. "Oh," she said when she noticed me, "David thought this would brighten the room. I hope you don't mind." I opened my mouth to say something, but no words came out. She smiled, nervous but determined, and went back to work.
That night, I went to bed early, pretending to be tired. I could hear their voices drifting from the living room, low, intimate laughter, the clinking of wine glasses. I buried my face in the pillow and let the tears come quietly, careful not to let them hear me. Days turned into weeks. I moved through the house like a ghost, unseen, unheard, waiting for something to change. Then one morning, while folding laundry, I found something I shouldn't have. It was a small velvet pouch tucked inside the basket, containing a gold bracelet. On the inside, it was engraved with the words, "To Ruby, with love, D." My hands froze. The bracelet gleamed under the light, mocking me with its simplicity. That was the moment it sunk in. He wasn't confused or figuring things out, as he'd said. He had made his choice, and he wanted me to live inside it, quietly. When David came home that evening, I waited for him in the kitchen. My heart thudded in my chest, but my voice was steady. "I found this," I said, placing the bracelet on the counter. He looked at it, then at me, without shame. "It's a gift," he said simply. "You shouldn't go through other people's things." "Other people's things?" I repeated. "David, she lives in my house." "Our house," he corrected. The calmness in his tone made my blood boil. "Do you even hear yourself?" I said, my voice breaking. "You brought your girlfriend here, into the home we built together, and now you expect me to pretend this is normal?" He sighed, rubbing his temples like I was the one being unreasonable. "I told you, Clara, I didn't want it to be this hard, but Ruby makes me happy. You and I haven't been happy for a long time." "I didn't know happiness meant cruelty," I said quietly. He didn't respond. He just walked past me, poured himself a drink, and sat down to watch television, as if we hadn't just destroyed whatever was left of our marriage. After that, something in me began to shift. I stopped trying to make sense of it. I stopped waiting for him to apologize or change. Instead, I started watching, listening. I began to notice details that didn't quite fit. Whispered phone calls late at night, receipts tucked away in his briefcase, a second credit card I didn't recognize. Every time Ruby left the house, David would go into her room. I could hear drawers opening, the faint click of a jewelry box. Once I even heard them arguing, her voice trembling, his sharp and impatient. At first, I thought she was simply a replacement for me, someone younger, livelier. But the longer I watched, the more I realized maybe she was just another version of me, caught in the same web of David's control. And that realization hurt more than anything else. A few nights later, I sat alone on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, watching the moonlight touch the garden. He used to be my favorite place. Peaceful, full of things I'd planted with my own hands. Now, it just looked like a museum of memories. I thought about leaving. I even looked up apartments online, tiny spaces with peeling paint and narrow kitchens. But then I remembered, this house was half mine. Every brick, every nail, every memory had my name in it too, and I wasn't ready to let him erase me. So, I made a decision. If David wanted to pretend this arrangement was normal, then I would make sure the truth found its way out, slowly, quietly, but surely. I didn't know how yet, but I knew this much. I wouldn't be silent forever. Because silence may protect you for a while, but it also eats you alive. And I was done being eaten. There's a point where pain stops feeling sharp and starts feeling like background noise, like the hum of a refrigerator or the ticking of a clock. You don't notice it every second, but it's always there, vibrating beneath everything you do. That's what my life became after David brought Ruby into our home.
Every sound, every smell, every tiny change reminded me that I didn't belong anymore. But I stayed. I stayed because I needed to understand what kind of man I'd married, the man I'd defended, cooked for, and built a life with. And slowly, painfully, the truth started showing itself. It began one morning when Ruby went out to run errands. I was cleaning the kitchen when I heard a buzzing sound coming from the counter. Her phone. I didn't mean to look, but the screen lit up with a notification, "Don't forget, rent due Friday." Rent? My breath caught. Why would she be paying rent? Unless she still had a place somewhere else? Curiosity replaced grief for a moment. I knew it was wrong, but I picked up the phone. Her messages were full of fragments, half-truths that painted a picture David had never mentioned. She'd been staying with friends before coming here. She owed money. She'd lost her job months ago. And then I saw one thread that froze me. Ruby. He says his wife doesn't matter anymore. He just needs time to transition. He'll give me the house once the divorce is done. Unknown contact. Sure he's serious? Guys say that all the time. Ruby. He showed me the papers, said she's not fighting him. The papers. Divorce papers. Except I'd never seen any. I dropped the phone back on the counter like it had burned me. My hands were shaking so badly I had to grip the edge of the sink just to steady myself. So this was his plan, to keep me here, humiliated and confused, while quietly trying to erase me on paper. That night, I waited until David was asleep. Then I went to his office, a small room at the end of the hall that used to be our shared study before he decided I was too distracting. The smell of his cologne and coffee filled the space. His desk was cluttered, but one folder stood out, crisp, new, and labeled with my name. Inside were documents, property deeds, bank transfers, and yes, divorce papers. Unsigned by me, but with his signature neat and bold. He'd marked the assets he wanted, the house, the savings, even my grandmother's jewelry that I had kept locked away. I don't know how long I stood there staring at the papers. My eyes blurred from the tears, but I couldn't stop looking. Each page felt like another nail sealing the coffin of our marriage. Suddenly, I heard footsteps behind me. Couldn't sleep? David's voice came from the doorway. I froze. He leaned against the frame, his arms crossed, expression calm, almost smug. "You shouldn't go through my things, Clara." I turned, my voice trembling. "You're divorcing me behind my back?" He sighed, as though I was the one making a scene. "I told you, this isn't working anymore. I was just trying to handle it smoothly." "Smoothly?" I repeated, incredulous. "You moved your mistress into our home, you lied to me, and now you're stealing what we built together, and you call that smooth?" He stepped closer, his voice low. "You're being dramatic. I'm offering you a clean break. You'll get a little settlement, enough to start over. You can't handle the house on your own anyway." That was the moment something inside me cracked. Not like glass, but like ice. Quiet, controlled, irreversible. I took a deep breath. I realized, you're right. I can't handle this house on my own. For a split second, he looked surprised, almost relieved, as if he'd won. But I continued, "I won't let you take what's mine. Not this time." His jaw tightened. "Be careful, Clara. You're making this harder than it needs to be." I met his gaze, steady, cold. "I think you've already done that." From that night on, I changed my approach. I stopped reacting. I stopped showing emotion. If he wanted a silent wife, I would give him one, but not the kind he expected. Every morning, I smiled politely, cooked breakfast, packed his lunch. But behind that quiet routine, I was documenting everything. Receipts, emails, voice memos, even the date Ruby moved on. I contacted an attorney, a woman named Lydia, who specialized in cases like mine. I met her at a small cafe on the outskirts of town, away from prying eyes. After listening to my story, she nodded slowly. Clara, what he's doing isn't just cruel, it's illegal. You have rights, and if he's transferring property without your consent, that's fraud. Her words hit me like sunlight breaking through fog. For the first time in months, I felt something other than despair. I felt purpose. We began building a quiet case, one piece at a time. Lydia told me not to confront him again. She said, let him think he's winning. Men like that always reveal themselves when they feel safe. So, I let him feel safe. I let him believe I'd given up, that I was fading into the background while he paraded his new life under my roof. I smiled at Ruby when she cooked dinner. I asked David about his work. I played my part perfectly, the quiet, compliant wife. But inside, I was gathering every shard of strength he'd tried to break. Because I knew what he didn't. Storms can look calm before they hit. Weeks later, the first crack appeared in their perfect little world. I came home one afternoon to find Ruby sitting on the porch, her mascara smeared, her eyes red. She looked up at me, trembling. Did you know? He told me he was divorced? I paused, my throat tightening. He told you that? She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. He said, you were just staying here until you found somewhere else. I didn't know, Clara. I swear I didn't know. For the first time, I saw her not as the woman who replaced me, but as another woman he'd lied to. I sat beside her in silence. The breeze moved through the garden, carrying the faint scent of roses I'd planted years ago. After a long pause, I said softly, you don't have to explain yourself, but you should know he's done this before. Her head turned sharply. Before? I nodded. Different face, same script. Ruby stared ahead, silent. I could see the understanding dawning in her eyes, the same slow, painful clarity I'd lived through. And in that moment, I realized something else. I wasn't alone anymore. After that day on the porch, Ruby, David, and me shifted, like the air had thinned and everyone could finally see what had been there all along. Ruby stopped meeting his eyes the same way. She no longer laughed at his jokes or followed him around like a shadow. I could sense it, that flicker of realization, the one that comes when you finally see someone for who they truly are. David, of course, noticed it too. His patience began to crack. He'd snap at her for small things, the way she cooked, the shows she watched, even the perfume she wore. It was the same pattern I'd lived through, only now I was watching it from the outside. And I'll admit it, there was a small, guilty part of me that felt relief. Not joy, not revenge, just quiet validation. I wasn't crazy. I hadn't imagined the cruelty. But I didn't gloat. I stayed silent. Because Lydia's voice echoed in my mind every time I wanted to lash out. Let him think he's in control. That's when he slips. So I played my role. Calm, distant, invisible. A few weeks later, Ruby knocked on my bedroom door late one night. Her eyes were puffy, her voice trembling. "Can I talk to you?" she whispered. I nodded and gestured for her to sit. She hesitated before speaking, twisting her hands nervously. "I think I made a mistake," she said quietly. "He's not who I thought he was." I stayed quiet, letting her find her words. "He promised he'd take care of me, but now he's controlling everything. My phone, my bank account, he checks my messages. He said if I ever talk to anyone about us, he'll make sure I have nothing." Her voice cracked on the last word. I reached over and handed her a tissue. "I said the same things to me once." She looked up, startled. "That's how it starts. He makes you feel like you can't survive without him, but you can." She wiped her tears, nodding slowly. Then she whispered, What are you going to do, Clara? I took a deep breath. I'm going to end this for both of us. The next morning, I called Lydia. We finalized the documents, a legal motion to freeze all joint assets and halt any property transfers. Lydia had gathered enough evidence. The forged signatures, the bank movements, the witnesses who'd seen Ruby living in the home as a tenant. Once we filed this, she said, he'll realize he's not untouchable anymore. That sentence stayed with me all day. Not untouchable. For years, I'd watched David manipulate everyone around him, calm, charming, calculated, but deep down, I knew his greatest weakness, his pride. He needed control like air, and the moment he felt it slipping, he'd unravel. So I let him walk right into it. That evening, we sat down for dinner. Ruby was quiet, pushing food around her plate. David kept checking his phone, irritated.
Finally, he looked up and said, "Clara, I need you to sign something tomorrow. Just some property adjustments. Lydia already prepared it." I nearly smiled. He didn't know that Lydia worked for me now. I tilted my head, pretending to be confused. "Property adjustments?" He nodded. "Nothing major, just formalities. You trust me, don't you?" For the first time in a long time, I met his gaze directly. "Of course," I said gently. "I've always trusted you." He seemed satisfied, arrogant enough to believe he still had me under control. The next morning, I got dressed carefully. A simple white blouse, my hair neatly tied back. I wanted to look calm, unthreatening. When David handed me the papers, I pretended to read them before setting them down. "I'll take these to Lydia myself, just to make sure everything's correct." He frowned. "No need for that. I can handle it." "I insist," I said, my tone soft but firm. "You've always said I'm too cautious. Maybe you're right." He didn't argue further, though I could see the irritation flicker behind his eyes. And that was the last morning he ever believed he had control. By the end of that week, Lydia filed everything in court. The notice arrived by courier 2 days later. David opened it at the dining table. His eyes scanned the first few lines, and his face drained of color. "What is this?" he demanded. I looked up from my tea, calmly. "A legal motion. To freeze our joint accounts until the divorce terms are reviewed. You didn't think I'd sign away my life, did you?" He slammed the papers down, his voice rising. "You think you can ambush me like this? I think," I said, keeping my tone even, "that you underestimated me." Ruby stood frozen near the doorway, watching him. For once, he didn't notice her. He paced the room, muttering curses under his breath. "You'll regret this, Clara. You'll walk away with nothing." "Maybe, but at least I'll walk away with my dignity." He turned to me, eyes blazing. "You always did love playing the victim." I met his gaze, steady and unshaken. "No, David, I just stopped playing your fool." That night, Ruby packed her things. She didn't say much, just a quiet "thank you" before leaving. I didn't stop her. I knew she needed to get out before she lost herself completely. When David came home later and found her gone, he didn't yell. He just stood there, staring at the empty space where her things used to be. For the first time, he looked small, like a man who'd built his life on power and realized it couldn't save him anymore. He turned to me and said, almost pleading, "You didn't have to do this." I looked at him, the man I once loved, the man who turned my life into a battlefield, and said softly, "You did this all by yourself." That night, I slept peacefully for the first time in months. The house was quiet again. Not empty, just quiet. I knew the hardest part was still ahead, the public part, when the truth would reach the ears of friends, family, and neighbors. But for now, I allowed myself a moment of stillness, because the worst was behind me, and for the first time in a long time, I could breathe again. The day the story went public, I didn't plan for it to happen, but sometimes truth doesn't ask for permission. It just bursts open. It started with a phone call. Lydia's voice was sharp with excitement. "Clara, the court filings are now public record. Someone in the neighborhood must have seen the case notice online. Your story's, it's spreading." I blinked, not understanding.
spreading. People are talking about David, about Ruby, about everything. And within hours, my phone began lighting up, old friends, colleagues, even my sister in Texas, all messaging the same thing. I saw the article. I can't believe he did that to you. At first, I felt sick. Then, strangely, free. For months, I'd lived under the heavy silence of shame. But now, the world knew. The weight wasn't just mine anymore. David came home that evening, furious. I could hear the slam of the car door before he even entered. He stormed into the kitchen, waving his phone like a weapon. "What the hell did you do?" "Nothing," I said calmly. "It's public record. People read it. That's all." "You're trying to ruin me." I met his glare unflinching. "No, David, I'm just done protecting you." For a long moment, he said nothing. Then his voice softened. Manipulative. Rehearsed. "Clara, we don't have to do this. We can still fix things." I almost laughed. "Fix things? You moved another woman into our home. You humiliated me. You drained our savings and called it love." His mask cracked. "I made a mistake, all right? But airing our private life like this, that's cruel." Cruel? Was watching my own husband share our bed with someone else while pretending I didn't exist. He turned away, muttering, "You've always been dramatic." That was the moment I realized, truly realized, that he wasn't capable of remorse, only damage control. By the weekend, the gossip had reached every corner of the community. People who once admired David, his co-workers, golf partners, church acquaintances, started avoiding him. At the grocery store, I overheard two women whispering near the produce aisle. "Did you hear? He's the one who made his wife live with his girlfriend. Disgusting. Poor woman." They didn't notice I was standing behind them. I didn't say a word. I just picked up my groceries, quietly grateful for the poetic symmetry of it all. The same neighbors who once pitied me now pitied him. Justice didn't always roar. Sometimes it whispered through the aisles of an ordinary supermarket. A week later, Lydia called again. "He's trying to withdraw funds from one of the frozen accounts," she said. "I've already stopped it, but he's panicking." "Let him. He's finally feeling what I felt, powerless." She chuckled softly. "You've come a long way, Clara." I smiled faintly. "No, Lydia, I've just come home to myself." Then came the confrontation I didn't expect. Ruby showed up at my doorstep again. But this time, she wasn't trembling. She looked determined. "I wanted to see you," she said. "I wanted to apologize." I stepped aside and let her in. She took a deep breath. "I didn't understand what you were going through. He told me you were crazy, bitter, obsessed with ruining him. I believed him. I'm sorry." I studied her for a moment, this young woman who'd once been a symbol of my pain. Now she was just another person who'd been caught in his web. "You don't owe me an apology," I said gently. "You just owe yourself a better life." She nodded, her eyes glassy. "He called me last night, begged me to come back, said he was nothing without me." "And what did you say?" I asked. She exhaled slowly. "I told him that's exactly what I planned to find out, who I am without him." I smiled then. "Good for you." We stood in silence for a long time. Two women, once divided by a man, now quietly united by the same kind of healing. Before she left, she turned and said, "You were right about him. Everything you said. I know. I just wish I'd been wrong." That evening, David packed his bags. He didn't say where he was going, only that he needed space. I didn't argue. When the front door closed behind him, I stood in the quiet house, realizing I didn't feel loss anymore, only release. I walked through each room, touching the walls, the furniture, the memories. The house no longer felt like a prison. It felt like a chapter closing. Later that night, I sat by the fireplace, the same spot where he once told me he loved me. I watched the flames flicker and thought about how love, like fire, can warm you, or burn everything you are if you let it. And I promised myself that I'd never again mistake destruction for passion. When Lydia finalized the settlement 2 weeks later, she called me into her office.
"It's done," she said, handing me the papers. "He forfeited his share of the house to you. I think he just wanted to disappear." I signed the documents, my hand steady. As I stood up to leave, Lydia smiled. "You know, Clara, some stories don't end with revenge. They end with peace, and you earned yours." Outside, the sky was a soft gold, the kind of light that feels like forgiveness. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of months lift from my chest. I wasn't the same woman who'd cried herself to sleep in that house. I was someone new, someone whole. That night, I wrote in my journal, "The truth always comes. Maybe not fast, maybe not loud, but it comes. And when it does, you realize that surviving wasn't the victory. Becoming yourself again was." It's been 6 months since David left the house for good. 6 months since I watched his car roll down the driveway and disappear into the horizon without a backward glance. And in those 6 months, I've learned more about peace than I did in 15 years of marriage. I didn't sell the house immediately. I stayed for a while. Not because I wanted to hold on, but because I needed to let go properly. I needed to walk through every memory, clean every corner, and reclaim it from the ghosts of our past. Some mornings, I'd wake up early, make coffee, and sit by the kitchen window where I once cried into cold cups of tea. The silence used to feel unbearable. Now it felt sacred. One by one, I removed traces of him. His framed degrees, the cologne bottle in the bathroom, the cufflinks that once symbolized success. It wasn't bitterness, it was healing through subtraction. My daughter, Emma, came to visit often. She'd stay for weekends, helping me fix things around the house. One evening, as we painted the living room walls a soft sage green, she said quietly, "You seem lighter, Mom." I smiled, looking at the brushstrokes. I think I finally remembered who I was before I became someone's wife. She leaned her head on my shoulder. "I'm proud of you." Those 4 words, "I'm proud of you," meant more than any apology David could have ever offered. When summer came, I finally sold the house. It wasn't an impulsive choice. It was a gentle one, the kind you make when your heart tells you it's time. I bought a small cottage near the coast, where the air smells like salt and the mornings hum with seagulls. The first night there, I slept with the windows open, listening to the waves, feeling the air on my skin like a promise. I didn't need a mansion. I didn't need a husband. I just needed space, real, honest space to be me again. Sometimes I still think about Ruby. She called once just to check in. She said she was working in another town, studying part-time, finally living on her own. I told her I was happy for her, and I meant it. It's strange, isn't it? How life has a way of weaving connection out of pain. If you'd told me a year ago that I'd speak kindly to the woman who once shared my husband's bed, I would have laughed. But forgiveness isn't weakness, it's freedom. Because when you forgive, you stop letting their story define yours. One evening, I went down to the beach near my new home. The tide was low, the sky streaked in pink and gold. I sat on the sand and watched the horizon swallow the sun. For the first time, I felt the beauty of solitude, not loneliness, but peace. I thought about the woman I used to be, the one who stayed quiet to keep the peace, who smiled through heartbreak, who believed love meant endurance. And I whispered to her in my heart, "You did your best, but it's time to live now." A week later, I received a letter in the mail. It was from David. The handwriting was familiar, neat, deliberate. "Clara, I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know I'm sorry. Ruby's gone, the business fell apart. I'm trying to rebuild, but it's lonely. You didn't deserve what I did. I hope you're happier now." I read it twice. Then I folded it, placed it in a drawer, and left it there. Not because I was angry, but because I no longer needed his words to move forward. Some apologies are just echoes, too late, too far away to matter. In the months that followed, I started teaching part-time at a local community center, creative writing for women rebuilding after divorce, loss, or betrayal. Each story I heard reminded me how universal pain is and how powerful it is to speak it out loud. I often tell them, healing isn't about pretending it never hurt. It's about learning to smile again even when you still feel the scar. Sometimes we'd sit together after class, drinking tea, laughing about the small joys, burnt cookies, stubborn plants, awkward first dates. And that's when I knew I was truly healed, when laughter no longer felt like a rebellion, but a return home. Now when I look back, I don't see tragedy. I see transformation. David didn't destroy me. He revealed me, the woman I'd buried beneath years of compromise and quiet endurance. I still believe in love, but now I understand that love should never cost your dignity or your voice. Because real love, the kind that lasts, begins inside you, not in someone else's approval. Tonight, as I sit by the window overlooking the sea, I light a small candle. Not for him, not for the marriage, but for the woman who survived it all. The flame flickers gently, reflected in the glass like a heartbeat, steady, alive. And I whisper softly, "You're home now." You know, sometimes life doesn't fall apart because you did something wrong. Sometimes it falls apart so you can finally see what was broken all along. I used to think love meant holding on, through disappointment, through humiliation, through the quiet kind of pain that sits beside you at dinner. But I've learned something else. Love that hurts you more than it heals you isn't love. It's fear disguised as loyalty. When David moved his new girlfriend into our house, I thought my world was ending. I thought I was watching the last scene of my own story. But it wasn't the ending. It was the beginning of me. There's a strange peace that comes when you stop trying to fix what doesn't want to be mended. You start sleeping better, breathing deeper. You start remembering who you were before you became the person who tolerated so much just to feel loved. So if you're listening to this and you feel stuck in that quiet limbo between what was and what could be, I want you to know something. You don't owe anyone your suffering. You only owe yourself the chance to heal. And one day, when the pain has softened and the house feels quiet again, you'll realize that peace doesn't come from the people who stay. It comes from the strength you find when they leave. Tell me, my friend, if you were in my place, would you have stayed and endured, or would you have walked away to save yourself? If this story touched your heart, share it, subscribe, and let's keep reminding each other, healing isn't the end of the story. It's the start of a new one.